In Atlanta's Centennial Park, a 72-year-old church matriarch was about to be humiliated over a false accusation. A summer street festival turned deadly serious when two aggressive police officers closed in on her with intimidation and force. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical celebrity guest. For decades, he'd served as a world champion martial artist and an Air Force veteran, known for ending fights before they began. When the officers tried to drag Miss Loretta away in front of her community, they had no idea they were targeting someone under the silent protection of a combat-hardened legend. Chuck stepped between them with the calm precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime diffusing danger, triggering a chain of events that would ripple through the city's police department and beyond. What began as a peaceful neighborhood gathering would become a viral flashpoint for justice. Centennial Park would never be the same after the day. A quiet intervention became a national lesson in true strength. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The heat pressed down on Centennial Park like a living thing, shimmering above the pavement despite the late afternoon hour. Atlanta's Heart of the City Street Festival pulsed with life vendor tents lining the walkways in colorful rows, the smell of fried catfish and peach cobbler hanging thick in the humid air. Children darted between legs, chasing each other through pockets of cool mist from the Olympic ring fountain. Laughter rippled through the crowd as freely as sweat rolled down backs. From his DJ booth, Devon DJ Dev Brooks spun a smooth transition from neo-soul to classic Outkast, his voice booming over the speakers. Y'all feeling that Atlanta energy today? Make some noise if you're alive out there. The crowd responded with scattered whoops and raised hands, bodies swaying in the golden summer light. Tasha Green wiped her brow with the back of her wrist, careful not to touch her face with fingers still sticky from serving her famous peach-glazed wings. Her food stand had a line 10 deep, and she worked with practiced efficiency, her braids tucked neatly under a colorful head wrap. 2 more baskets of wings, and a sweet tea for the gentleman in the Braves cap, she called over her shoulder to her teenage nephew working the fryer. Glancing up as she made change, she spotted Miss Loretta Jenkins making her way slowly through the crowd, pausing every few steps to embrace someone or pinch a child's cheek. Miss Loretta, 72 years of dignity and fire packed into a 5-foot frame, wore a bright yellow sundress that made her dark skin glow. A broad-brimmed hat shaded her face from the sun, but couldn't hide the warm smile she offered to everyone she passed. "Miss Loretta!" Tasha called out, waving her over. "I saved you some of that mac and cheese you love. Come get it while it's hot." The elderly woman's face creased with pleasure as she changed direction, her cane tapping a gentle rhythm against the pavement. "Child, you know the way to my heart," she said, her voice carrying the gentle rasp of age and wisdom. 30 yards away, against the shaded edge of a brick wall, Chuck Norris stood quietly observing the festival. His presence was subtly baseball cap pulled low, simple jeans, and a button-down with rolled sleeves. Nothing that screamed celebrity. Only the occasional double-take from passers-by revealed that someone recognized the martial arts legend. He'd arrived 20 minutes earlier for a brief appearance at the youth charity booth, where he'd signed a few autographs and taken photos with volunteers before slipping away from the spotlight. Now he watched the festival unfold with calm interest, particularly drawn to the interactions between the vendors and the community they served. There was something genuine here that reminded him of small-town gatherings from his youth before fame, before the spotlight. Eli Mendoza, security badge clipped to his belt, scanned the crowd with practiced eyes. The former amateur boxer recognized Chuck immediately, but maintained a respectful distance. Festival security had been briefed on the celebrity's appearance and instructions to give him space. Eli's walkie-talkie crackled with routine check-ins from other guards stationed throughout the park. "All clear at the south entrance," he reported, then continued his patrol, nodding politely to Chuck as he passed. The festival flowed around them a river of humanity connected by music, food, and the simple joy of being together on a beautiful summer day. Children laughed, couples held hands, elders told stories. And for a precious hour, the tensions of the outside world seemed to dissolve in the shared experience. Then it happened, the first ripple of discord. Tasha noticed it first. Two police officers approaching Miss Loretta's table with purposeful strides. Officer Blake Riker led the way. Tall and broad-shouldered, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the festival lights. Behind him followed Officer Tim Harlow, younger and leaner, scanning the crowd nervously, as if anticipating trouble. "Excuse me, ma'am." Riker's voice cut through the cheerful chatter around Tasha's stand. "We need to speak with you about a complaint." Miss Loretta looked up from her plate, surprise momentarily crossing her face before settling into a practiced neutrality that generations of black Southerners had perfected when dealing with authority. "What seems to be the problem, officer?" Riker positioned himself directly in front of her, one hand resting casually on his belt near his taser. "We've received reports that you were involved in an altercation near the north entrance about 20 minutes ago." Miss Loretta's eyebrows rose. "An altercation? I've been making my rounds saying hello to folks. Haven't had an altercation in 20 years, unless you count arguing with my sister about her cornbread recipe." A few chuckles rose from those close enough to hear, but quickly died under Riker's stern glare. "Ma'am, we have a witness who says you were verbally abusive to a vendor who wouldn't give you free food." Miss Loretta's spine straightened, dignity rising like a shield. "That is absolutely false. I've lived in this neighborhood for 50 years. Everyone here knows me." Tasha stepped forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Officers, there must be some mistake. Miss Loretta is—" "Step back, ma'am," Officer Harlow interrupted, one hand raised. "This doesn't concern you." The music from DJ Dev's booth had shifted, almost unconsciously, to something softer as he watched the scene unfold. His fingers hovered over the controls, uncertain whether to maintain the festival's energy or respond to the tension building near Tasha's stand. Across the way, Chuck Norris had gone very still, his attention now fully focused on the interaction between the officers and the elderly woman. Years of training had taught him to read body language like others read books. And everything about Officer Riker's posture spoke of aggression, barely contained. "I'm going to need to see some identification," Riker continued, his voice growing louder, drawing more attention from nearby festival goers. "My ID is in my purse at home," Miss Loretta replied calmly. "I didn't think I'd need it to attend a community festival where I volunteered for the past 15 years. "Then you'll need to come with us to sort this out at the station," Riker said, reaching for her arm. Miss Loretta pulled back. "I most certainly will not. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not leaving this festival because of some mix-up." The crowd around them had gone quiet, the festive atmosphere evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Phones began to appear in hands, some recording discreetly, others more openly. "Ma'am? I'm not going to ask again." Riker's voice hardened as he stepped closer. Eli Mendoza moved toward the developing situation, security training kicking in. "Officers," he said respectfully, "I'm festival security. Perhaps I can help clear this up. Miss Loretta is a community elder, and—" "Back up," Harlow snapped, hand moving to his belt. "This is police business." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a collective unease, spreading like ripples in still water. Parents pulled children closer, vendors stopped mid-transaction, and even DJ Dev's music seemed to fade into the background as all attention turned to the confrontation. Chuck Norris took 3 measured steps forward, still on the periphery, but with a clearer view. His face remained impassive, but those who looked closely might have noticed the slight narrowing of his eyes. the subtle tension in his jaw. "You're causing a scene, ma'am," Riker said to Miss Loretta, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "The only one causing a scene is you, officer," Miss Loretta replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I've spent my life teaching children to respect authority. But respect goes both ways." Riker's hand closed around Miss Loretta's upper arm. "That's it! You're coming with us!" "Take your hands off me," Miss Loretta said, steel entering her voice. "I know my rights." Tasha had her phone out now, recording openly. "She's done nothing wrong, you can't just—" "One more word and you're coming too," Harlow warned, stepping toward Tasha with one hand raised. The crowd's unease crystallized into something sharper anger, tinged with fear. They outnumbered the officers hundreds to one, yet most stood frozen, conditioned by years of seeing similar scenarios play out on news feeds and viral videos, rarely with positive outcomes for those who intervened. Riker began pulling Miss Loretta toward a bench, his grip visibly tightening. "Sit down. Now. You're hurting me," Miss Loretta said, wincing as she tried to maintain her balance with her cane. DJ Dev's voice suddenly cut through the speakers, unnaturally loud in the tense silence. "Hey y'all, let's keep this festival peaceful. Everyone take a breath." The words were neutral, but his eyes were locked on the confrontation, fingers hovering over his phone's emergency dial. As Riker forced Miss Loretta onto the bench, a path cleared through the crowd not by anyone's command, but by the unconscious recognition of something significant about to happen. Like animals sensing a storm, people stepped aside, creating a direct line of sight between Chuck Norris and the unfolding confrontation. Chuck stood perfectly still, watching. Not a muscle twitched in his face, but his eyes never left the officers. Decades of discipline kept him rooted in place, assessing, waiting for the right moment if there would be one. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring as Officer Riker looked up from Miss Loretta and scanned the crowd, searching for any challenge to his authority. His gaze swept past Chuck, then snapped back, recognition dawning. The festival hung suspended between what was and what would be community's joy shattered by the intrusion of unchecked power. A beloved elder humiliated in front of her neighbors, and at the edge of it all, a legend standing silent, the weight of his potential intervention heavy in the air. The first act of a drama no one had come to see was unfolding beneath the hot Atlanta sun, with every person present unknowingly cast in a role they never auditioned for: witness, victim, oppressor, or hero. Riker's grip on Miss Loretta's arm tightened further, and she couldn't suppress a small cry of pain. The sound cut through the silence like glass, sharp and wounding. And Chuck Norris took another step forward. That small cry from Miss Loretta's lips changed everything. It sliced through the festival's remaining joy like a knife through silk, leaving the air heavy with tension. The sound wasn't loud, just a soft gasp of pain, but in the strange, suspended silence that had fallen over this corner of Centennial Park, it might as well have been a thunderclap. Officer Riker's fingers dug deeper into Miss Loretta's arm as he forced her onto the bench. "I said sit down and stay down," he growled, no longer bothering with the veneer of professionalism. His sunglasses had slipped slightly, revealing eyes hard with something that went beyond mere Dutya hunger. For submission. For dominance. Miss Loretta sat, ramrod straight despite the discomfort, her dignity wrapped around her like armor. The yellow sundress seemed to glow against her dark skin, a beacon drawing all eyes to this island of confrontation in the sea of festival-goers. "I don't appreciate being manhandled, officer," she said, each word precise and measured. "I taught third grade for 40 years. I know the difference between discipline and bullying." A few feet away, Officer Harlow shifted nervously, eyes darting between his partner, the crowd, and the phones recording the scene. Unlike Riker, whose aggression seemed to feed on attention, Harlow appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the audience. "Just cooperate, ma'am," he said, his voice lacking Riker's conviction. "We can sort this out quickly if you just comply." Tasha's live stream counter ticked upward, 50, then 100, then 500 viewers joining by the second. Her narration was quiet but steady. "This is happening right now at the heart of the City Festival. Miss Loretta Jenkins, 72 years old, being detained for absolutely nothing. This is what we live with every day." In his DJ booth, Dev had lowered the music to a background murmur, keeping one hand on his equipment while the other held his phone, ready to call for help if needed. His voice came through the speakers, deliberately casual but tinged with tension. "We're taking a quick music break, y'all. Stay cool out there. Remember, we're all family today." The crowd had formed a loose circle around the confrontation, maintaining a wary distance close enough to witness, far enough to feel safe from involvement. Faces reflected a complex mixture of emotions: outrage, fear, helplessness, shame. Some looked away, unable to bear watching. Others stared, transfixed, as if witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Eli Mendoza had positioned himself at the edge of the circle, close to where a narrow pathway remained open in the crowd. His security training told him to keep people moving, prevent a bottleneck that could become dangerous. But his instincts told him something else was about to happen. His eyes kept drifting to the still figure of Chuck Norris, now standing 15 yards away from the officers, silent and unmoving. "I've done nothing wrong," Miss Loretta stated again, looking directly at Riker despite the intimidating angle of his stance above her. "And I'm not going anywhere. If you have questions, you can ask them right here, in front of witnesses." Riker's jaw tightened. "You're resisting a lawful order. That's a crime." "The only crime I see," she replied, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness, "is abuse of power." Riker's hand moved to his belt, fingers brushing his taser. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable a threat. "You want to add threatening an officer to the charges?" A collective intake of breath rippled through the onlookers. Tasha's voice grew more urgent on her live stream. "He's threatening to tase her. Miss Loretta is 72 years old. Someone needs to do something." But who? The question hung unspoken in the air. Who would step forward? Who would risk everything to challenge armed officers, with their badges and their authority and their weapons? In the tense silence, Riker's attention shifted from Miss Loretta to the crowd surrounding them. His face twisted into something between a sneer and a smile. "What are you all looking at?" he demanded, turning slowly to sweep his gaze across the witnesses. "This is police business. Move along." No one moved. No one spoke. The silence grew heavier. Riker's voice rose, the edge of a taunt entering his tone. "What's the matter? Got something to say? Anyone here think they know the law better than I do?" His challenge met only more silence, which seemed to feed his growing sense of power. He straightened, squaring his shoulders, dominance radiating from his posture. It was then that he spotted Chuck Norris. At first, recognition didn't register, just awareness of a man standing slightly apart from the crowd, utterly still, watching with unnerving focus. Then Riker's eyes widened behind his sunglasses, and the corner of his mouth curled upward. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look who we have here." Beside him, Harlow followed his partner's gaze, confusion giving way to recognition. "Is that Chuck Norris?" Riker confirmed, his voice dripping with mockery. "Hollywood's favorite tough guy." The crowd's attention swiveled to Chuck, who hadn't moved, hadn't changed expression. He stood with the relaxed readiness of a man who had spent decades mastering his body. Hands loose at his sides, eyes steady on the officers. Riker took 2 steps toward Chuck, deliberately positioning himself between Miss Loretta and the martial arts legend. "You enjoying the show, Norris? Or did you come to sign some autographs for your remaining fans?" Chuck remained silent, his gaze unwavering. Something about that silence seemed to irritate Riker more than any verbal challenge might have. He took another step forward. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or did you leave your dialogue back on the movie set?" A nervous titter ran through part of the crowd, quickly suppressed. The tension in the air had taken on a new dimension. The confrontation was no longer just about Miss Loretta, but had expanded to include this unexpected celebrity presence. DJ Dev's voice came through the speakers again, a hint of excitement breaking through his professional tone. "Looks like we've got a special guest at the festival today. Chuck Norris in the house, y'all." Phones that had been recording the police confrontation now swiveled to capture this new development. Tasha's livestream comments exploded with viewers recognizing the action star. Riker seemed to feed on the attention, his voice growing louder. "You know, I used to watch your shows when I was a kid. Walker, Texas Ranger, right? All those spinning kicks and roundhouses." He mimed a kick, deliberately exaggerated and clumsy. "Pretty impressive. For the camera." Harlow laughed nervously, glancing between his partner and Chuck. "Blake, maybe we should just..." "Just what?" Riker cut him off. "Afraid of a washed-up actor? He's what, 80 now? Those moves only work with stuntmen who know how to fall." Throughout this, Chuck's expression never changed. He simply watched, still as stone, seemingly unaffected by the taunts. But those who looked closely might have noticed the slight shift in his stance, weight centered. Balance perfect. A lifetime of training evident in the subtle readiness of his posture. Miss Loretta, still seated on the bench, watched the interaction with keen eyes. Despite her situation, a small, knowing smile touched the corners of her mouth. Eli Mendoza had moved closer, positioning himself where he could intercept anyone from the crowd who might rush forward. But his attention, like everyone else's, was fixed on the confrontation unfolding between the officer and the silent legend. Riker, emboldened by Chuck's continued silence, stepped forward again, closing the distance between them to less than 10 feet. "What do you say, Norris? Want to show these people some of your famous moves?" His hand patted his taser. "Fair warning, though, this isn't a movie set. Real officers don't go down easy." The taunt hung in the air. The crowd held its collective breath. Phones recorded from every angle. In her live stream, Tasha whispered, "Oh my God, is this really happening?" And still, Chuck said nothing. His silence was not the silence of fear or hesitation, but the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to veto himself or anyone else. Something about that unshakable calm seemed to push Riker toward the edge of his control. His face flushed with anger, and he took another step closer. "What's wrong, old man? Afraid without your stunt coordinator to make you look good?" Chuck's eyes flicked briefly past Riker to Miss Loretta, then back to the officer. The movement was subtle, but it communicated volumes. Concern for the elderly woman, assessment of the situation, calculation of risks. Riker followed his glance, then smiled nastily. "Oh, I get it. You're worried about the old lady? Don't be. She's just going to the station to answer some questions. Nothing for a big Hollywood star to concern himself with." From the bench, Miss Loretta's voice rose, strong and clear. "Young man, you might want to reconsider your tone. In my experience, the quietest men are often the most dangerous." Riker's head snapped around. "Nobody asked you, lady." In that moment, with Riker's attention divided, something shifted in Chuck's demeanor. It wasn't a large change, just a subtle squaring of the shoulders, a slight forward tilt of his chin. But to those who knew what to look for, it was as clear as a declaration of intent. Eli Mendoza saw it. Having spent years in boxing rings, he recognized the moment a fighter decided to engage. Quietly, efficiently, he began guiding people back, expanding the empty space around the confrontation. DJ Dev saw it too. His voice came through the speakers, almost reverent. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're about to witness something historic." Riker turned back to Chuck, irritation flashing across his face at the festival DJ's commentary. "You hear that, Norris? They think you're going to do something. Isn't that cute?" He spread his arms wide. "Well, we're all waiting for the big show." The moment stretched taut, the festival's typical sounds fading until all that remained was the heavy silence of anticipation. Then, with deliberate slowness, Chuck removed his baseball cap. The simple action somehow commanded attention more than any shout or sudden move could have. He handed the cap to a wide-eyed teenager standing nearby. Then, calmly rolled up his sleeves another turn. Still, he said nothing. Riker's cocky smile faltered slightly at this silent preparation. "You think that's supposed to scare me? I've taken down men twice your size." Harlow, watching his partner with growing concern, took a half-step forward. "Blake, come on. Let's just take the woman to the station and file the report. This isn't worth it." "Shut up, Tim," Riker snapped without looking away from Chuck. "Mr. Movie Star here needs to learn that the real world doesn't work like Hollywood." In the tense silence that followed, a new sound emerged, the tap, tap, tap of Miss Loretta's cane as she rose from the bench, straight-backed and dignified. "Young man," she addressed Riker, "I believe you've forgotten something important." Riker barely glanced at her. "Sit back down," Miss Loretta continued as if he hadn't spoken. "In all those movies and TV shows you claim to have watched, Chuck Norris never threw the first punch. He only fought to protect others." Her voice carried across the hushed crowd. "Something you might consider before you continue down this path." Riker's patience snapped. He spun toward Miss Loretta, one hand raised. "I said sit down!" What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the crowd would later disagree about the exact sequence of events. Riker's raised hand never reached Miss Loretta. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Chuck Norris had closed the distance between them. His movement so fluid, it seemed almost casual. He didn't grab or strike the officer, he simply positioned himself between Riker and Miss Loretta. His presence suddenly an immovable barrier. "Step back," Chuck said, his voice low and even. They were the first words he had spoken, and they carried the quiet authority of a man unaccustomed to repeating himself. The crowd's collective gasp was audible. Phones raised higher, and Tasha's voice on her live stream rose with excitement. "Oh my God, he stepped in! Chuck Norris just stepped in!" Riker froze, momentarily stunned by the speed of Chuck's intervention and the sudden sound of his voice. Then his face darkened with rage. "You just interfered with a police officer in the performance of his duty," he snarled. "That's a felony, movie star or not." Chuck didn't move, didn't blink. His voice remained steady. "The lady asked you to take your hands off her. I suggest you comply." Harlow's hand hovered near his weapon, his face a mask of uncertainty. "Sir, please step back. Don't make this worse." But it was Riker who escalated, jabbing a finger into Chuck's chest. "You've got 3 seconds to back off before I put you down." Something dangerous flickered in Chuck's eyes, not anger, but focus. The kind of pure, concentrated attention that precedes decisive action. The festival held its breath. In the eerie silence, DJ Dev's whispered, "Oh damn," was picked up by his microphone and broadcast across the entire park. Officer Riker, face flushed with fury and pride, counted loudly. 1, 2. Riker's voice cut through the silence, finger still pressed against Chuck Norris's chest. The crowd was motionless, a tableau of wide eyes and held breath. Phone cameras recorded from every angle, capturing this surreal confrontation between law enforcement and legend. Chuck didn't flinch at the officer's countdown. He stood perfectly still, a human wall between Riker and Miss Loretta. His breathing remained calm, his gaze steady, a stark contrast to Riker's flushed face and barely contained rage. Third. Before Riker could finish, he spotted something that made him pause. A festival volunteer had approached the nearby stage where DJ Dev's equipment was set up. The volunteer whispered something to Dev, who nodded and picked up his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dev's voice boomed across the festival grounds, "I've just been informed that we have a special guest with us today. Chuck Norris is here supporting the Youth Martial Arts Outreach Program, teaching kids discipline and self-respect." It was a deliberate move, reminding everyone of Chuck's purpose at the festival. Shifting the narrative, buying time. Dev's eyes were locked on the confrontation as he continued. Mr. Norris was scheduled to say a few words about the program. "Officer, perhaps you'd like to escort our guest of honor to the stage instead." The suggestion hung in the air, offering Riker an honorable exit from the situation he'd created. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Even Officer Harlow nodded slightly, clearly relieved at the potential de-escalation. But Riker wasn't looking for an exit. Something had snapped in him, perhaps the public nature of the confrontation, perhaps wounded pride, perhaps the growing awareness that hundreds of phones were recording his every move. Instead of backing down, he reached for the microphone clipped to his shoulder, keying it on so his voice would carry through the portable PA system some officers carried during large events. "Attention, festival attendees." His voice crackled through the speaker, artificially amplified and tinged with authority. "This is Officer Blake Riker of the Atlanta Police Department. We have a situation that requires your cooperation." The crowd's murmurs died away, replaced by a new tension as Riker continued. "We are attempting to question a suspect in an ongoing investigation, and we are being obstructed by an individual who believes his celebrity status puts him above the law." Chuck's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his Posturian, almost imperceptible readiness, like a bowstring drawn taut. Riker, emboldened by the sound of his own amplified voice, stepped back and made a theatrical gesture toward Chuck. For those who don't recognize him without the special effects and stunt doubles, this is Chuck Norris, or what's left of him. A nervous titter ran through parts of the crowd, quickly silenced by disapproving glances from others. Tasha's live-stream comment section exploded with reactions, her viewer count now in the thousands. "Mr. Norris seems to think that playing a Texas Ranger on TV gives him the right to interfere with real law enforcement," Riker continued, voice dripping with mockery. "Perhaps he's confused about the difference between fiction and reality in his old age." Miss Loretta, still standing tall despite the tension surrounding her, spoke up. "Young man, there's no call for disrespect. Mr. Norris is simply—" "Silence!" Riker snapped, turning toward her with such sudden vehemence that several people in the crowd gasped. "You'll speak when spoken to." Chuck's hand moved then, not toward Riker, but gently onto Miss Loretta's shoulder, in a gesture of reassurance and respect. The movement was calm, deliberate, and somehow more powerful than any aggressive action would have been. Riker saw it and sneered. "Oh, that's touching. The old action hero protecting the old lady. Makes for a nice photo op, doesn't it?" He turned in a slow circle, addressing the crowd directly now. "Are you getting this on your phones? The great Chuck Norris, defender of little old ladies." The mockery in his voice was unmistakable, but it fell flat against the dignity of the scene he was trying to diminish. Chuck, standing protective beside Miss Loretta, neither intimidated nor provoked by the officer's increasingly erratic behavior. Harlow, clearly uncomfortable with his partner's performance, stepped closer. "Blake," he said in a low voice, We should call this in. Get a supervisor down here. Shut up! Riker hissed, then keyed his mic again. So, Mr. Norris, since you're so eager to play the hero today, why don't you show us some of those famous moves? The ones that made you such a big star back when people still cared who you were. He spread his arms in an exaggerated invitation. Come on. Give the people what they came for. One of those. What do you call them? Roundhouse kicks? He mimed a clumsy kick, drawing scattered, uncomfortable laughter. Chuck remained silent, his hand still on Miss Loretta's shoulder. His focus hadn't wavered from Riker, but neither had he taken the bait. The restraint was palpable, no, the restraint of fear, but of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of and saw no need to prove it. DJ Dev, sensing the dangerous edge in Riker's taunting, tried again to diffuse the situation. Hey folks, let's remember we're here to celebrate our community. How about some music while we— Turn that off! Riker shouted toward the DJ booth, his composure crumbling further. This isn't a dance party anymore. Eli Mendoza had been quietly organizing other security staff, positioning them to ensure the crowd stayed back, while simultaneously creating a clear path toward the festival exits. Now he stepped forward, security badge visible. Officer, he said calmly, as head of festival security, I'm concerned about public safety here. Perhaps we could. Another tough guy. Riker cut him off. Stay back. Unless you want to join the movie star in a ride downtown. Eli stopped, hands raised in a placating gesture. But his eyes found Chuck's. Something passed between theme and unspoken communication, professional to professional. Eli nodded slightly and resumed his position at the crowd's edge. Riker, noticing the exchange, laughed harshly. Look at that. The karate man's got himself a fanboy. He turned his attention back to Chuck. You must love this, don't you? All these people watching. All these cameras. Just like the good old days. Throughout the escalating situation, Chuck's expression had remained calm, his breathing steady. He hadn't risen to any of Riker's provocations or responded to the increasingly personal jibes. But now, for the first time, he spoke not to Riker, but to Miss Loretta. Ma'am, he said quietly. Are you all right? His voice was warm, respectful, and carried easily despite its softness. The simple human concern in those 4 words stood in stark contrast to Riker's theatrical posturing. Miss Loretta nodded, a small smile touching her lips. I'm fine, Mr. Norris. Thank you for asking. The exchange, though brief, shifted something in the atmosphere. The focus was no longer on Riker's performance but on the dignity of the connection between the elderly woman and the man standing beside her. Riker sensed it too, the attention moving away from him, and his face darkened. He keyed his mic again, voice rising with frustration. That's real touching. The old man checking on the old lady. Maybe you two can swap stories about the good old days. He paused, then added with deliberate cruelty. If you can remember them. From the crowd, Tasha's voice rose, sharp with indignation. That's enough. Miss Loretta taught half this neighborhood. Show some respect. Murmurs of agreement spread through the onlookers. The mood was shifting, collective patience wearing thin with Riker's behavior. Sensing the crowd turning against him, Riker decided to escalate further. He unclipped his taser from his belt, not pointing it but holding it visibly at his side. Let me make something clear, he announced, voice hard. I am the authority here. Not some washed-up action star, not some mouthy vendor, and certainly not some old woman who thinks she's above questioning. The appearance of the weapon sent a chill through the gathering. Parents pulled children closer. Several people began quietly moving toward the exits. Chuck noticed the shift in the crowd's energy and made a subtle gesture with his free hand palm down, a calming motion. Remarkably, it had an effect. People stilled, watching, waiting. Riker saw it too and laughed incredulously. Would you look at that? They actually listened to you. All these sheep following the celebrity. He stepped closer, taser still in hand. But I've got news for you, Norris. Your fame doesn't mean shit to me. I don't care how many bad guys you've pretended to beat up. This is reality. He gestured with the taser toward Miss Loretta. Now, for the last time, the lady is coming with us, and you're going to step aside, or things are going to get very real, very fast. The threat hung in the air, electric with possibility. Phone cameras captured every moment, every nuance of the confrontation. Tasha's livestream counter had climbed past 10,000 viewers, people across Atlanta and beyond, now witnessing the standoff in real time. Chuck looked at the taser, then back at Riker's face. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not fear, but a slight narrowing of his eyes, an assessment completed and decision made. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his hand from Miss Loretta's shoulder and took a single step forward, placing himself fully between her and Riker. "Sir," he said, his voice level and surprisingly gentle, "I understand you're doing your job, but there's been a misunderstanding here." He gestured toward the crowd. "All these people know Miss Loretta. Whatever complaint you've received, it can be resolved without escalation." The reasonableness of Chuck's response seemed to infuriate Riker further. He raised the taser slightly. "Step back. Now." Each word bitten off, sharp with threat. Officer Harlow, watching his partner with growing alarm, finally intervened. "Blake, this is getting out of hand. We need to call for backup." "And?" "I said shut up," Riker snapped, not taking his eyes off Chuck. "This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," Harlow replied, unexpected firmness in his voice. "We're partners, and this isn't procedure." Riker ignored him, focus locked on Chuck. "You had your chance to walk away, movie star. Now, you get to see what happens in the real world." In the DJ booth, Dev made a split-second decision. He turned up the volume and spoke clearly into his microphone. "Attention everyone. I'm patching this through the festival live stream. The whole city is watching now, Officer Riker." It was a bluff. The festival's official stream had been showing performances from the main stage all day, but a masterful one. The message was clear. Whatever happened next would be witnessed far beyond this square of pavement. A flicker of doubt crossed Riker's face, quickly replaced by deeper anger, the dangerous kind that comes when a man feels cornered by his own choices. "Last chance, Norris," he growled. "Back off or I'll drop you right here. See how tough you really are with 50,000 volts running through you." Chuck didn't move. His voice remained calm. "There's no need for that, officer." "Oh, I think there is," Riker replied, raising the taser to aiming position. "Sometimes people need to learn the hard way." What happened next occurred so quickly that many viewers of Tasha's livestream would later watch it frame by frame, trying to understand the sequence of events. As Riker's finger tightened on the trigger, Chuck moved not toward the officer, but in a fluid sidestep that seemed almost casual. The taser fired, barbs shooting forward through the space where Chuck had been standing a split second before. Momentum carried Riker forward as Chuck continued his smooth movement, one hand coming up to redirect the officer's extended arm with minimal force. The redirection was so subtle, it looked like Riker had simply overbalanced, stumbling forward as Chuck stepped aside. In the same fluid motion, Chuck's other hand gently removed the taser from Riker's grip, not grabbing or wrenching, but simply taking possession of it as the officer struggled to regain his balance. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Riker caught himself, spinning around to face Chuck, only to find the martial arts master standing calmly, holding the taser pointed safely toward the ground. "You!" Riker sputtered, rage and disbelief warring on his face. "You just assaulted an officer! You're under arrest!" His hand moved toward his service weapon, but Officer Harlow stepped in, grabbing his partner's arm. "Blake, stop. He didn't assault you. Everyone saw it." Harlow's voice was urgent, eyes wide with warning. "There are hundreds of cameras on us right now." The crowd had gone completely silent. Collective breath held. In that silence, Chuck carefully placed the taser on the ground, then straightened and took a deliberate step back, hands visible at his sides. "Officer," he said to Harlow, "I apologize for the interference, but I couldn't allow anyone to be hurt unnecessarily." Harlow nodded, still restraining his partner. "I understand, sir." Riker wrenched his arm free, face contorted with fury. "You understand? He just disarmed a police officer. That's a felony. He prevented you from making a serious mistake," Harlow replied, standing his ground. "Look around you, Blake. This is being recorded by hundreds of people. What were you thinking, threatening to tase Chuck Norris in front of all these witnesses?" The use of Chuck's name seemed to momentarily break through Riker's rage, reminding him of exactly who he had been confronting. His eyes darted around the circle of phones, the sea of faces, the live stream counter on Tasha's screen now showing over 20,000 viewers. Reality began to sink in. Whatever complaint had started this valid or no had spiraled into something much larger, much more public, with potential consequences far beyond this moment. In the brief silence, Miss Loretta spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "Young man," she addressed Riker, "I've lived long enough to know that sometimes the wisest thing to do is admit when a situation has gotten away from you." She smoothed her yellow dress with dignity. "There's no shame in stepping back and starting fresh." Riker's jaw worked as he struggled with his options, each worse than the last. Continue the confrontation? Back down publicly? Arrest everyone involved? Before he could decide, a new voice cut through the tension. "Officer Riker! Officer Harlow! Stand down immediately!" The crowd parted to reveal a police lieutenant striding purposefully toward the scene, face set in grim professionalism. Behind him followed two more officers, expressions carefully neutral. "Lieutenant Chen," Harlow acknowledged, relief evident in his voice. Riker's face paled slightly, but he stood his ground. "Sir, I was attempting to question a suspect when this man," he gestured at Chuck, "interfered with." "I said stand down, officer," Lieutenant Chen repeated, voice sharp. "That's an order." He turned to Chuck, his demeanor shifting to respectful professionalism. "Mr. Norris, I apologize for this incident. Are you all right, sir?" Chuck nodded once. "I'm fine, Lieutenant. Thank you." Chen turned to Miss Loretta next. "Ma'am, are you injured in any way?" "Just my dignity, Lieutenant," she replied with a small smile. "And perhaps a bruise where the officer grabbed my arm." Chen's expression tightened. He turned back to Riker and Harlow. "Both of you, report to the command post. Now, I'll deal with this situation." Harlow nodded, already turning to leave. Riker hesitated, looking as if he might argue. But something in Chen's expression stopped him. With a final glare at Chuck, he turned and followed his partner. As the officers departed, a collective exhalation seemed to pass through the crowd. The immediate danger had passed, but the emotional weight of what had just occurred still hung in the air. Lieutenant Chen addressed the onlookers. "Folks, I appreciate your patience. The situation is under control now. Please continue enjoying the festival." He turned to Chuck and Miss Loretta, lowering his voice. "Mr. Norris, Ms. Jenkins, if I could have a word in private." DJ Dev, sensing the need to restore normalcy, faded up the music something upbeat but not too energetic, helping the crowd transition back to festival mode. Gradually, people began to disperse, moving back toward the food stalls and performance areas, though many remained nearby, phones still recording, unwilling to miss whatever might happen next. Tasha ended her live stream with a quick summary for her viewers. Justice prevailed today, folks. Miss Loretta is safe. Chuck Norris showed what real strength looks like. And the whole world was watching. I'll update you all later. She tucked her phone away and moved toward her food stand, where customers were beginning to line up again, many discussing what they'd just witnessed. Eli Mendoza directed his security team to create a small buffer of space around Chuck, Miss Loretta, and the lieutenant, allowing them to speak without being overheard by the dispersing crowd. Within that pocket of relative privacy, Lieutenant Chen spoke earnestly. Mr. Norris, I can't apologize enough for Officer Riker's behavior. That's not how the Atlanta PD conducts itself. Chuck nodded in acknowledgement but directed the conversation away from himself. I'm more concerned about Miss Loretta. She was treated roughly, without cause. Chen turned to the elderly woman. Ms. Jenkins, we'll need a statement from you about what occurred. And if you'd like to file a formal complaint, I can arrange for someone to take that immediately. Miss Loretta considered this, then shook her head slightly. I'll provide a statement, Lieutenant. As for complaints, I prefer to see what actions your department takes on its own before I decide if further steps are necessary. Her response held both grace and subtle pressure, a reminder that accountability would be expected. Chen nodded, understanding the implicit message. That's fair, ma'am. I assure you this incident will be thoroughly reviewed. He glanced back toward where Riker and Harlow had disappeared. Officer Riker's behavior today was completely unacceptable. Chuck, who had remained characteristically quiet, spoke up. Lieutenant, if I may, the younger officer, Harlow, attempted to de-escalate several times. He shouldn't face the same consequences as his partner. Chen looked at Chuck with new respect. I appreciate that observation, sir. It will be noted in my report. As they spoke, festival life gradually resumed around them. The music returned to its previous volume. Children began playing in the fountains again, and the scent of food once more dominated the air. But something had changed. An undercurrent of excitement ran through the crowd. The buzz of shared experience, of history, witnessed firsthand. Miss Loretta glanced at Chuck, a warm smile spreading across her face. Mr. Norris, I believe I owe you my thanks. Chuck shook his head slightly. No thanks necessary, ma'am. I just did what anyone should have done. But they didn't, she replied softly. You did. Their exchange was interrupted by Lieutenant Chen. Mr. Norris, we'll need a statement from you as well, if you're willing, of course. Of course, Chuck agreed. Whatever helps resolve this properly. Chen nodded gratefully, then excused himself to coordinate with other officers who had arrived at the festival's perimeter. Left momentarily alone with Miss Loretta, Chuck spoke quietly. Are you sure you're all right, ma'am? Miss Loretta's eyes crinkled with a smile. I've weathered worse storms than an officer with an attitude problem. She patted his arm gently. But I must say, watching you handle that situation was something I won't soon forget. Chuck's expression softened slightly. I'm just glad I was here. Not coincidence, I think, Miss Loretta said thoughtfully. Some things happen exactly when and where they're supposed to. Before Chuck could respond, they were approached by a young woman from the charity booth, looking both apologetic and awestruck. Mr. Norris? I'm so sorry about all this. Your scheduled appearance? Chuck smiled reassuringly. Let's continue as planned. These children have been waiting. As Chuck prepared to fulfill his original purpose at the festival, word of what had occurred spread throughout Centennial Park and beyond. The incident had lasted less than 15 minutes from start to finish, but its impact was just beginning to ripple outward. In her food stand, Tasha checked her phone to find her live stream had been viewed over 100,000 times and was being picked up by local news stations. DJ Dev had already been contacted by 3 radio shows wanting interviews about what he'd witnessed. And across social media, the hashtag #QuietStrength was trending, attached to clips of Chuck's calm defense of Miss Loretta. But perhaps most telling was the change in the festival itself. As the afternoon continued, attendees who approached Miss Loretta did so with a new reverence, offering not just the usual affection, but a deeper respect for her dignity in the face of injustice. And those who recognized Chuck did not ask for selfies or autographs, but simply nodded in silent acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. Real heroism that needed no soundtrack, no special effects, just the quiet courage to stand up when it mattered. The confrontation had ended, but its echo would continue long after the festival lights dimmed and the music faded. In a world that often celebrated the loudest voice, the most aggressive stance, a different kind of strength had been demonstrated today, the power of restraint, of measured response, of standing firm without surrendering dignity. And in a small corner of Atlanta, that lesson would not soon be forgotten. The heart of the city festival flowed around Chuck Norris and Miss Loretta, like a river around two immovable stones. Lieutenant Chen had departed after arranging for statements to be taken later, leaving them in a momentary island of calm. Despite the officers' attempt to restore normalcy, the festival had been charged with a new energy that hummed beneath the resumed celebrations. "I should head to the children's area for the demonstration," Chuck said, glancing at his watch. "Would you like to join me, Miss Loretta? Unless you need to rest after all this." The elderly woman straightened her yellow hat with dignity. "Young man, I taught elementary school for 40 years. It takes more than one hothead with a badge to wear me out." Her eyes twinkled. "Besides, I'd like to see these children you're working with." Chuck offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, which Miss Loretta accepted with a gracious nod. Together, they began walking toward the eastern edge of the park, where the youth charity had set up its area. As they moved through the festival, people stepped aside respectfully, some nodding in acknowledgement, others smiling or murmuring quiet thanks. No one approached directly or asked for photographs. There was an unspoken understanding that something more significant than celebrity had been witnessed today. Eli Mendoza appeared beside them, walking casually as if by coincidence rather than design. "I'll make sure you get there without interruption," he said quietly to Chuck. From his DJ booth, Dev saw them passing and smoothly transitioned to a new track and instrumental piece, with a gentle, dignified melody. Tasha, back at her food stand, paused her work to watch them pass, raising her hand in a subtle salute to Miss Loretta. "You've made quite an impression on this community," Chuck observed. Miss Loretta chuckled softly. "When you live somewhere long enough, you become part of its fabric. These people watched me age, and I watched them grow up." She squeezed his arm gently. "But today, I think you're the one who made the impression, Mr. Norris." "Chuck, please," he replied. "Chuck," she agreed. "Though my students would never believe I'm on a first-name basis with Walker, Texas Ranger." They reached the youth zone, where colorful banners announced various activities. About 20 children in white uniforms with various colored belts were practicing basic forms on blue mats, supervised by young instructors. When they spotted Chuck, the practice faltered as excitement rippled through the group. Daniel Reeves, the program coordinator, hurried toward them. "Mr. Norris, we heard there was some kind of disturbance. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine now, Daniel," Chuck assured him. "Just a misunderstanding that got resolved. This is Miss Loretta Jenkins. She'll be joining us for the demonstration." Before they could continue, a commotion at the edge of the youth zone drew their attention. Officer Harlow had appeared, now without his partner, looking uncomfortable but determined. Two other officers stood at a respectful distance behind him. Chuck placed a reassuring hand on Eli's arm as the security guard moved to intercept the officer. "It's all right. Let's hear what he has to say." Officer Harlow approached slowly, hands visible at his sides in a deliberate, non-threatening posture. When he reached them, he removed his cape, a gesture of respect. "Mr. Norris, Miss Jenkins," he began, voice low enough that only those nearby could hear. I wanted to apologize personally for what happened earlier. My partner's behavior was inexcusable, and I should have intervened sooner. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Chuck nodded in acknowledgement. But it was Miss Loretta who spoke. Apology accepted, Officer Harlow. It takes courage to acknowledge when things go wrong. Harlow's relief was visible, but he wasn't finished. There's something else. The complaint that started all this, it was false. We've confirmed that the person who called it in has a history of making bogus reports. I see, Miss Loretta said. So I was accused for no reason at all. Yes, ma'am. I'm truly sorry. Harlow hesitated, then continued. Lieutenant Chen asked me to inform you that Officer Riker has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Chuck studied the young officer thoughtfully. What about you? Harlow straightened slightly. I'll face a review board too, as I should. I failed to prevent my partner from escalating the situation. His gaze was steady now, accepting responsibility. Whatever consequences come, I'll accept them. The response seemed to satisfy Chuck. He extended his hand. I hope you continue serving your community, officer. It needs men who can admit their mistakes. Harlow shook the offered hand, surprise and gratitude flashing across his face. As the officer departed, Daniel looked at Chuck with newfound respect. That was impressive. Chuck shook his head slightly. Just necessary. Holding grudges helps no one. Miss Loretta smiled knowingly. Forgiveness is strength to offer, haps the hardest kind to master. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of spectators for the demonstration. Word had spread about Chuck's presence, and the area was filling with festival-goers eager to witness the martial arts legend in action. Daniel turned to Chuck. We're ready whenever you are, sir. Chuck nodded. Then surprised Daniel by turning to Miss Loretta. Would you do me the honor of introducing me to these young people? I think they'd appreciate hearing from someone they respect in their community. Miss Loretta's eyes widened momentarily, then crinkled with pleasure. I'd be delighted. As Daniel led Miss Loretta to the microphone, Chuck took a moment to center himself, breathing deeply. The children sat in neat rows on the mat, backs straight, eyes forward, while parents and spectators gathered behind them, an atmosphere of anticipation building. Miss Loretta approached the microphone with the same dignity she had shown throughout the day's events. Her voice carried clearly across the youth zone. Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Loretta Jenkins. I've taught in this community for more than 4 decades. She paused, looking warmly at the children. Today we have a very special guest who understands something important, that true strength isn't about intimidation or force, but about discipline, respect, and protecting others. Her words carried extra weight given what had transpired earlier, though she made no direct reference to the confrontation. I've just witnessed firsthand how this man conducts himself in a difficult situation, and I can tell you he embodies the very values this program aims to teach. She turned slightly, extending her hand toward Chuck. It is my great honor to introduce Mr. Chuck Norris. The applause was immediate and heartfelt, not the frenzied reaction of fans to a celebrity, but the genuine appreciation of a community for someone who had stood up when it mattered. Chuck walked forward, accepting the microphone from Miss Loretta with a respectful nod. His presence commanded attention without effort, decades of discipline, evident in every controlled movement. Thank you, Miss Loretta, he began, voice calm and measured. And thank you all for coming today. He paused, looking directly at the children seated before him. I'm here to talk about martial arts, but not just as a physical practice. True martial arts is about developing character, about becoming the kind of person who has the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult. The children watched him with rapt attention, absorbing every word. Behind them, the adults listened just as intently, many nodding in agreement. The techniques I'll show you today are important, Chuck continued, But they're just tools. What matters is how and why you use them. The morning after the festival dawned clear and bright over Atlanta, the city already humming with activity. But beneath the routine of urban life pulsed something different, a current of excitement, of shared experience. The events at Centennial Park had escaped the boundaries of the festival, spreading across social media, local news, and countless conversations. In her modest home in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood, Miss Loretta Jenkins sat at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea beside her, as she scrolled through her tablet. The yellow sundress from yesterday hung freshly washed on her back porch, catching the morning breeze like a banner of remembered dignity. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since she'd awakened calls from former students, neighbors, even journalists seeking her perspective on what people were now calling the Norris intervention. She'd answered a few, declined most, preferring to process the experience in her own time. The doorbell rang, interrupting her reflections. When she opened the door, she found Tasha standing on her porch, holding a paper bag that emanated the unmistakable aroma of fresh biscuits. "Brought you breakfast," Tasha said with a smile. "Figured you might not want to go out with all the attention." Miss Loretta welcomed her in, grateful for the thoughtfulness. "Have you seen what they're saying online?" she asked as they settled at the kitchen table. Tasha nodded, pulling out her phone. "It's everywhere. But there's something you should see that just happened this morning." She pulled up a video that had been posted less than an hour earlier, footage from a police body camera showing Officer Riker's previous incidents of aggression and excessive force. The whistleblower who had released it remained anonymous, but the timing was unmistakable. "People are speaking up now," Tasha said quietly. "Your stand with Chuck Norris opened the floodgates." Across town in a downtown hotel suite, Chuck Norris was preparing to leave Atlanta. His flight had been delayed until noon, giving him an unexpected morning of solitude. Like Miss Loretta, he had been inundated with messages from his publicist, from media outlets, from the charity organization, thanking him profusely for the attention his appearance had brought to their cause. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Lieutenant Chen, Atlanta PD. After a moment's consideration, he answered. "Mr. Norris, there have been some developments I thought you should know about," Chen began. "Officer Riker has been suspended pending investigation, but that's not why I'm calling. His body camera footage from previous incidents was leaked this morning. It shows a pattern of behavior that validates what happened yesterday." Chen explained how the department was now facing serious scrutiny, with multiple officers coming forward with accounts of Riker's misconduct that had previously gone unreported. "The thing is," Chen said, his voice lowering slightly, "none of this would have come to light without yesterday's incident. Your involvement catalyzed something important here." When Chuck finally spoke, his response was characteristically measured. "It's not about me, Lieutenant. It's about doing what's right, especially when it's difficult." "Yes, sir. I understand that." Chen paused, then added, "Ms. Jenkins asked me to pass along a message. She's receiving the Community Support Award at the City Council meeting tomorrow evening. She hoped you might delay your departure to attend." Chuck glanced at his schedule, mentally rearranging commitments. "Tell her I'll be there." Meanwhile, at the Atlanta Police Department headquarters, the mood was tense. The leaked body camera footage had created a firestorm within the ranks, with officers divided between those who supported accountability and those who viewed the leak as a betrayal. Officer Tim Harlow sat alone in the break room, nursing a cold coffee as he scrolled through news coverage on his phone. His own role in the incident was being scrutinized, some praising his attempts to de-escalate, others criticizing him for not doing more sooner. A shadow fell across the table. Harlow looked up to find Sergeant Rivera, a veteran officer known for her straightforward approach. "Rough day," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. It wasn't a question. Harlow nodded, setting his phone down. "I keep replaying it," wondering what I should have done differently. Rivera studied him thoughtfully. You know what struck me about that video? Norris never threw a punch. He just positioned himself where he needed to be and let Riker's own momentum do the work. She leaned forward slightly. There's a lesson there, Harlow, about how to use your position effectively. Across the city in Centennial Park, festival workers were breaking down the last of the booths and stages. DJ Dev was helping dismantle his sound equipment when he noticed a small group of teenagers hanging around the spot where yesterday's confrontation had occurred. They weren't causing trouble, just talking, recreating the scene, one of them doing a comically exaggerated impression of Officer Riker, while another mimicked Chuck's calm stance. Eli Mendoza appeared beside Dev, security uniform exchanged for casual clothes. Kids are still talking about it, he observed. Dev nodded. Everyone is. Did you see the footage that leaked this morning? Yeah. Makes what happened yesterday even more significant. Eli glanced around the nearly empty park. You know, I've worked security at dozens of events. Never thought I'd witness something like that. A celebrity standing up to a cop? Eli shook his head. No. Someone with real power, using it exactly the way it should be used, with restraint. No ego, no showing off. Just doing what needed to be done. By late afternoon, the city's attention had shifted to the upcoming council meeting, where Miss Loretta would be honored. What had been planned as a routine recognition had transformed into something much larger, a symbolic response to the previous day's events, a statement about community values and civic responsibility. The council chambers were expected to be filled to capacity, with overflow seating arranged in adjacent rooms. Local businesses had donated refreshments. Community organizations planned to present Miss Loretta with additional honors, and city officials hastily prepared speeches that acknowledged both the incident and its broader implications. As evening approached, 3 key figures prepared for the gathering, each in their own way. In her home, Miss Loretta selected a dignified blue dress and pearl earrings. Dressing with the care of a woman who understood the importance of presentation, she had taught generations of children that how you carried yourself mattered, that dignity was a choice made daily through countless small actions. In his hotel room, Chuck Norris packed his bag methodically, leaving out only what he would need for the council meeting and his rescheduled departure the following morning. His preparations were efficient, focused, the habits of a disciplined mind evident in every movement. And in his apartment across town, Officer Tim Harlow adjusted his tie in the mirror, the formal uniform feeling both familiar and strange after his meeting with Lieutenant Chen. The outcome had not been what he expected. Instead of punishment, he had been assigned to a new Community Engagement Initiativa program aimed at rebuilding trust between police and the neighborhoods they served. Your actions yesterday showed judgment, Chen had told him. Not perfect judgment, but the capacity to recognize when a situation is going wrong and the courage to speak up. We need more of that, not less. By 7 o'clock, the city council chambers were filled beyond capacity. The crowd represented a cross-section of Atlanta, young and old, representing every ethnicity and background that made up the city's rich tapestry. Mayor Harris approached the podium. Good evening, Atlanta, he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. We gather tonight to honor one of our own, a woman whose dignity in the face of injustice reminded us all of what this city stands for at its best. As Miss Loretta rose from her seat in the front row, the applause was thunderous, not the polite acknowledgement of a routine civic honor, but the heartfelt recognition of a community for someone who embodied their highest values. She made her way to the podium with measured steps, back straight, head high. The same dignity she had shown in the face of Riker's aggression, now displayed before her community's affirmation. Thank you, Mayor Harris. And thank you to this council and this community, she began, her voice clear and steady. I accept this honor, not for myself alone, but for all those who stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. 6 months after the festival, Centennial Park bloomed with spring flowers, the memory of last summer's confrontation having settled into Atlanta's collective consciousness, not forgotten, but transformed into something constructive, a catalyst rather than a wound. Chuck Norris had returned to his life of quiet discipline and carefully chosen public appearances. But on this bright April morning, he found himself back in Atlanta, seated in Miss Loretta's classroom at the community center, watching as she guided a group of children through fractions with the same patience and dignity she had shown that day in the park. His visit was unpublicita, personal promise kept rather than a public appearance. When Miss Loretta had invited him to see her work firsthand, he had agreed without hesitation, recognizing the opportunity to witness the real impact of the woman whose stand beside him had helped transform a community. 7/12 plus 3. 12 equals what, Jason? Miss Loretta asked, her voice carrying the warmth and expectation that had guided generations of students. The young boy furrowed his brow in concentration. 10/12, which reduces to 5/6. Excellent. She beamed with genuine pleasure at his success. Chuck observed from the back of the room, struck by the seamless blend of authority and kindness in her teaching style. The children clearly adored her, responding to her high expectations with eager effort. At the end of the lesson, Miss Loretta acknowledged his presence to the class. Children, we have a special guest today. Some of you may recognize Mr. Chuck Norris, who has come to see how well you're learning your fractions. The reaction was immediate, eyes widening, excited whispers passing between desks. But to Chuck's surprise, there was something more mature in their response than mere celebrity excitement. One boy raised his hand. You're the one who stood up with Miss Loretta at the festival, aren't you, sir? Chuck nodded, moved by the framing of the question. Not fought the police, or was in those action movies, but stood up with Miss Loretta. Yes, he replied simply. I had that honor. Another child, a girl with bright beads in her hair, spoke next. My mom says you showed that being strong doesn't mean being mean. Is that true? Your mother is wise, Chuck answered. Real strength is about control, knowing when to act and when to wait, using only the force that's necessary, protecting those who need protection. After the class was dismissed, Miss Loretta led Chuck through the community center to see the changes that had emerged in the wake of last summer's incident. The building itself had been renovated, thanks to increased funding and community support. New programs had been established, including a youth leadership initiative and regular dialogue sessions between police officers and residents. Officer Harlow leads those meetings now, Miss Loretta explained as they passed a room where chairs were arranged in a circle. He's become quite an advocate for community-oriented policing. Even got himself in a bit of trouble with some of the old guard for pushing too hard for reform. Chuck nodded, unsurprised. Takes courage to challenge a system from within. They settled on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree in the small courtyard, the white blossoms creating a canopy overhead. The youth martial arts program has expanded, Chuck observed, having noticed the new training space during their tour. More children participating? Nearly triple the enrollment, Miss Loretta confirmed. Parents see the value in teaching discipline and respect, especially given what happened. Your influence extends far beyond that one afternoon, you know. Chuck shook his head slightly. The credit belongs to the instructors who are here every day, teaching those values consistently. I was just passing through. Miss Loretta studied him with her penetrating gaze. You do that, don't you? Deflect praise. Minimize your own impact. He met her gaze evenly. The moment speaks for itself. It doesn't need embellishment. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Tim Harlow, now sporting stripes on his uniform, carrying materials for the afternoon's youth program. Miss Loretta. Mr. Norris. Good to see you both. The transformation in the young officer was evident not just in his rank, but in his bearing. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been present during the festival confrontation. Sergeant now, I see, Chuck observed. Congratulations. Harlow nodded, setting down his box. Thank you, sir. It's been an interesting 6 months. Tim has become our liaison with the department, Miss Loretta explained. He's implementing the Community Accountability Program. The mayor announced that night at the council meeting. It's making a difference, Harlow added. Complaints are down, community engagement is up. We've still got a long way to go, but, he shrugged, the gesture containing both modesty and determination. And Officer Riker? Chuck asked, his tone neutral. Harlow's expression tightened slightly. Terminated. After the body camera footage leaked, other officers came forward with accounts of similar incidents. There's actually a department-wide review of conduct happening now. After Harlow departed, Chuck and Miss Loretta continued their tour, stopping to observe a self-defense class for women being taught by Eli Mendoza, the former festival security guard who had now established a regular program focused on empowerment through personal safety. Later, they visited Tasha's restaurant, the former food stand, now expanded into a proper establishment called The Stand, its name a deliberate double meaning that customers immediately understood. You should know Officer Riker is suing me for defamation over the live stream, Tasha told them quietly. Claims it destroyed his career. That's troubling. Miss Loretta frowned. But Tasha's expression remained undaunted. Maybe. But 3 different civil rights attorneys have offered to represent me, pro bono. And the community has started a legal defense fund that's already raised twice what I'd need. You turned documentation into advocacy, Chuck observed. I just held up my phone, Tasha replied with characteristic modesty. The truth did the rest. As they enjoyed their meal, various community members stopped by their table, each sharing some small part of how the festival confrontation had affected them personally or inspired changes in their lives. At the end of the day, Chuck accompanied Miss Loretta back to her home. At her front gate, she paused in the gentle illumination of her porch light. You know, most people who experience a viral moment like ours try to capitalize on it, book deals, speaking tours, that sort of thing. Not my style, he replied simply. No, she agreed. Nor mine. Perhaps that's why what happened that day resonated so deeply with people. It wasn't performance or posturing. Just 2 people standing on principle when it mattered. She gestured toward the community center visible a few blocks away. What happened at the festival taught this community more than 1,000 lectures ever could. It showed them that principles aren't just words on a page or ideas to discuss. They're choices we make when those choices have real consequences. Chuck nodded, understanding the depth of what she was expressing. The most important lessons are caught, not taught. Exactly so. Her smile held the wisdom of her years. And what they caught that day was the essence of true strength, not domination or intimidation, but the quiet power of standing firm for what's right. She extended her hand, which he took in his own. Safe travels, Chuck Norris. Know that you'll always have a place in this community, whether you're physically present or not. Thank you, Loretta, he replied, the use of her first name acknowledging the friendship that had grown between them. What you've built here over decades is the real foundation. I was just passing through at the right moment. Her eyes twinkled with humor. We'll have to agree to disagree on that point. With a final nod of respect, Chuck turned and began walking back toward his hotel, his figure gradually receding into the evening shadows. The true measure of his impact would not be found in headlines or viral videos, but in the daily choices of those who had witnessed principle in action and chosen to incorporate that lesson into their own lives. Standing up when standing up mattered, speaking truth to power, protecting those who needed protection. In the end, The most powerful walk away wasn't his departure from the festival confrontation, but the ongoing journey of a community discovering its own strength, one principled choice at a time. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.